This video is to present the work that was completed for the University of Michigan 2G lab project. Our team members consist of Sherry, Winnie, Maninder Rai, Rehan, Anit Kumar, Gursharan Sandhu, Basi Michael, and myself, Suraj Patel. In the outline, you can see that we will first start with the introduction, followed by the collaboration which is occurring between the University of Michigan and the University of Waterloo. We will then talk about the scope and the objective of the project, as well as the approach we took and the deliverables that were met. We will then talk about the lab design overall, as well as the scenarios that we came up with, followed by conclusions. The project is oriented to help refugees living in refugee camps all over the world. The project is also about researching ways to implement information technology into these daily humanitarian tasks. The 2G lab will serve to replicate these real-life issues that refugees face within camps. This lab could serve as a means to solve real-life issues that occur in refugee-based camps. The project overall is a collaboration between the University of Waterloo and the University of Michigan. With collaborative research and a good understanding of the lab's needs, we can decide on the specifications of the lab, including the equipment that would be needed. The three main areas of research consist of emergency relief, food aid and supply chain, and assisting refugees. Our team's focus was on assisting refugees. The scope of this project is to provide 3 scenarios with respect to assisting refugees within refugee camps. We must also provide the means to simulate these scenarios. That would include any scripts or any equipment that would be used to run the simulation. The objective of this project is to provide a document with 3 fully detailed scenarios. The scenario would describe the roles that the user would be playing and the communication over the 2G network that would be communicated. The approach we took for this project started with the planning stage. In this stage, we mainly understood the requirements that would be needed for this project. Our next step was data collection. In this step, we first started by researching online articles with respect to refugees within refugee camps. Certain things like what refugees look for in a camp, what they expect, what they need, what they want. To further broaden our knowledge within this aspect, we spoke to Kevin McRitchie. When speaking with Kevin, we asked him a bunch of questions based on his experiences working with refugees. He provided a lot of insight on real-life scenarios. An example of this would be how refugees fight over power cables when they're trying to charge their phone. It was after Kevin's phone call where we decided the 3 main scenarios of our lab. For research on equipment, we spoke to Matt Altman at Cisco. Matt gave us insight on equipment such as network routers, gateways, and access points, which he himself used while setting up Wi-Fi all over Greece. After analyzing the data collected from phone calls with Kevin McRitchie and Matt Altman, we then went to our next step, which was execution. And this is where we fully designed our scenarios with fully detailed scripts and specifications with Wi-Fi and 2G equipment. This led us to our final step, which was delivery, which is a detailed project report with lab specs and scenarios, and this video as well. One of the major aspects to this project is power. The lab's primary source for power is the grid itself. However, for backup power, we looked into UPS, power supplies, and diesel generators. Using a UPS power supply as backup power is the best idea in this case, as it gives us a good amount of power as backup in case a power outage were to occur, and it would kick in as soon as the power were to go out. This can be used to simulate low power situations or limited power resources. This may help to simulate natural disasters which might occur in the lab. The following diagram can be seen as a possible layout of our 2G lab. The potential stakeholders of this lab would be NGO staff. The key takeaway from this diagram would be the separate room or closet that would hold most of the equipment and keep it out of reach from people outside in the actual lab. Here are more pictures of the lab itself. The following diagram can be seen as the basic Wi-Fi layout of our lab. We are using the Meraki MX65W as our gateway to the internet and connecting MR66 access points to broadcast our network. The reason we chose Meraki as the base of our equipment is for many reasons. Firstly, the ability to have multiple SSIDs broadcasted. This will allow us to separate the Wi-Fi for NGO workers and leaders and refugees. It will also allow us to filter the content that is available to each user. On top of that, it can be controlled over the cloud using the Meraki dashboard. On top of that, it's built for such harsh environments and places with limited power. It was Matt Altman at Cisco who recommended this line of equipment. We then did further research on Meraki equipment before deciding on these two. Scenario 1 deals with natural disasters which occur in the camp. In this scenario, we have limited power, possibly no Wi-Fi, and limited resources. The key communication in this scenario is between the camp leader and other workers, the camp leader and refugees amongst each other. As seen in the map below, our scenario takes place in Syria, as indicated by the blue circle on the map. This diagram illustrates the hierarchy of communication within the camp in this scenario. This scenario is important because at the brink of an earthquake or other natural disaster, the situation would be very chaotic and the camp leader must try and smooth things out. The refugees, on the other hand, might be furious, angry, frustrated, or even sad, and all of this must be illustrated in the scenario. This scenario runs in two parts, the first part being at day 1 of the natural disaster and the second part being at week's end. The scenario highlights the key communication that would occur at day 1 and at week's end and why it is necessary for this information to be communicated. Scenario 2 deals with inter-camp migration. The key communication in this scenario is between the camp leaders at Camp A and Camp B. The information that is communicated would be things like information on the refugees migrating, a confirmation on the availability of resources at Camp B, any travel information, or how to get access to things like food, water, or weather information along the route. It is also important that both camps have similar resources. This is to try and standardize a refugee's experience within camps. This scenario is important because in the case where many refugees are migrating from camp to camp, a camp leader must ensure that they have the resources available to allow this large of migration. It will also give them time to prepare prior to them arriving. The graph below illustrates data from a survey on what refugees use internet for. As shown in the graph, we can see that refugees mainly use internet for communicating between friends and family, entertainment, and looking for information. This is why it's important that both camps have similar resources in order to make this communication possible. Scenario 3 takes place in Greece just after a migration has occurred from Syria to Greece via Jordan. This scenario covers the situation where a refugee has just arrived at a camp in Greece and is trying to gather as much information as possible. The route which was used to travel can be seen in the map below, highlighted in red. This scenario is important because upon arrival at a camp, refugees may have many questions to ask and they want answers. These questions are usually for things like Wi-Fi, food, water, shelter, or where I can charge my phone. This scenario covers the onboarding process within the camp, which would include check-in with one of the workers, as well as completing a refugee information form. The main communication in this scenario is between camp workers and the refugees, which is mainly a question and answer process. Summing up, in this project, we developed 3 scenarios for assisting refugees within refugee camps. They consist of natural disasters, inter-camp migration, and access to information for refugees. We also looked at equipment that would be used to help simulate these scenarios, and one of them can be seen as the UPS backup power supply, which can be used to simulate limited power situations. Our project report will cover all of this in much more detail.